Thank you for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We are committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, regulatory actions, and political maneuvers in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact your freedoms.
Please support the State of Freedom by becoming a monthly supporter or member of the Warrior Circle, or by advertising your business, your nonprofit, or your event with us. Go to freedomstate.us. We are bypassing the mainstream media cartel and the establishment political parties in Louisiana and coming directly to you, spreading the uncensored voice of freedom across Louisiana and beyond. Fuego, it's just unbelievable. Whether it's the flame-grilled carne asada or a signature mango margarita. I had one of those too. They're serving up a literal feast of freedom at Calle Fuego. It's just extraordinary. I love the owners, Andres and Jose. They run such a great restaurant. The service is extraordinary. The atmosphere is great. So if you're in Pineville and the Alexandria area or passing through, or if you live there, go to Calle Fuego and tell them the State of Freedom sent you.
Louisiana lawmakers kept their foot on the gas for carbon capture and sequestration this past session, despite strong pushback from landowners and clear constitutional protections for private property. Multiple bills to rein in eminent domain for CCS pipelines and storage failed. Many never saw the light of day. Today, we break down what passed, what didn't, and what this troubling, accelerating agenda really means for families and sovereignty across the state. It is Thursday, June 11th. It's 10 a.m. Central. I'm Danielle Walker, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host, the watchdog in chief of Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, Chris Alexander. And we're coming to you live this morning on Voice of the People USA TV and radio network, on Rumble, X, YouTube, Facebook. Please take a moment to hit the thumbs up button. Share this with your friends. If you haven't subscribed, like for notifications, just hit that little bell so you are reminded when we go live, because we love to have you in the chat, and we would love to talk to you live. You can give us stars on Facebook, retweet on X. Let's see what else you can do. You can also put a little cash in the tip jar if you want. Just go to freedomstate.us and go to the tip jar. You can do that there. If you're on Rumble, you can always leave a Rumble rant. And you can also catch us later on our audio-only platforms, pretty much everywhere you might be listening to a podcast. Well, good morning, Chris. How are you doing?
Oh, doing reasonably well. Danielle, doing reasonably well. I wasn't in a particularly good mood last night or this morning in the wee hours as I was working my way through these carbon capture and sequestration bills. But, it's always a silver lining in everything. And we have a record, which is always very, very valuable.
That's right. I know yesterday when I was taking a look at what bills we might bring forward, so we have followed probably somewhere over 40 plus bills related to carbon capture and sequestration. We're not going to bring all 40 to you this morning, so don't worry about that. But it's enough to send you into orbit. It really is. It really is. And so maybe the best place to start is the place we always start, which is in Scripture, so we can get ourselves settled before we get into some kind of ugly unveiling, I guess. I mean, neither one of us were looking forward to this. We're just not, because we wanted a better outcome. We wanted to see people fight for our state and win. And that's not exactly the story today, but it's an important story, and it's a story that everybody deserves to hear and know. So we will tell it. We'll be faithful to tell it. But first, let me read the scripture of the day. It is Psalm chapter 16, verses 5 through 8. And it says, "Lord, I have chosen you alone as my inheritance. You are my prize, my pleasure, and my portion. I leave my destiny and its timing in your hands. Your pleasant path leads me to pleasant places. I'm overwhelmed by the privileges that come with following you, for you have given me the best. The way you counsel and correct me makes me praise you more. For your whispers in the night give me wisdom, showing me what to do next. And do I have one more verse? Yeah. Because you are close to me and always available, my confidence will never be shaken, for I experience your wraparound presence every moment. And this morning, I was praying about how to live in God's grace. And he brought me to this passage. And, it's so easy to get overwhelmed. It's so easy to allow ourselves to get caught up in work, good work, at the expense of enjoying the people and the opportunities that God has put in our lives for our enjoyment. And it's so easy to take on work and projects that are really for great purposes. We might even be taking on work that the Lord's called us to do, but we take it to the extreme. And we feel like the fate of the whole world rests on our ability to grind it out and get it done. But that's not how the Lord wants us to live. That's not how Jesus lived. He didn't live stressed out. He didn't live like a ping pong ball running from one urgent task to the next. So he's reminding me today, and maybe he's reminding you too, that his paths are pleasant and they lead us to pleasant places, not stress-filled, time-sensitive places. He is our counselor, and he's the one who shows us what to do next. We don't have to figure it out all on our own. That's not the rhythm of life he has for us. So as we stay close to him, he will be our source of confidence because we will experience his presence every moment. And if the God of the universe is right here with us right now, whom or what shall we fear?
Wow. Wow. As you are reading that psalm, Danielle, what came to my mind was the image of David in the shadow of the valley of darkness, or the valley of the shadow of darkness in Psalm 23. And there's a part there where he says, you prepare a banquet for me, O Lord, in the presence of my enemies. And it is extraordinary to me, that vision of having all of these enemies and hostile forces around us. And yet the Lord is preparing a banquet for us, anointing our head with oil right there in their presence. And he doesn't eliminate that's what I find so interesting. He doesn't eliminate the enemies. He elevates David above them. David is sitting there enjoying a banquet and having his head anointed with oil right there in the presence of all those who would love to destroy him. That is the relationship that God has to evil. He's not worried about it. And David
Yeah.
wasn't worried about it. I think that's such a powerful image to me. And it's consistent with your admonition today that regardless of external circumstances, we are safe, we are protected, and we can actually enjoy a proverbial meal right there in the presence of our enemies. I find that so beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful, Chris. And I think just a reminder that you and I have fun here. There's a lot of tough stuff that we have to talk about on this show, and some days more than others. And so today, you and I were talking before the show. Gosh, you know, we wanted different outcomes for this. So many people work so hard to see different outcomes on this issue, but we can still move forward with joy. The Lord, we do the work, and the results. We always say this, Chris, are the Lord's. So.
Oh, and by the
Mhm.
way, I want you to know that our very, very good friend Dave, he's always telling me, Chris, you got it wrong. That's not John Adams. It's John Quincy Adams who
Ah,
said, duty is ours and the results are God. But I just want Dave to know today that I finally got it right. That's John Quincy Adams. God bless you, Dave, if you're
God
listening.
bless you, Dave. Thanks. Look, everybody's here to keep our record straight, and we appreciate that. We always want to set the record straight. So, why don't we just get into it, Chris? Are you ready for this CCS extravaganza this morning?
I'm as ready as I'm ever going to be. I'm raring to go like a diesel fueled engine. Let's rock.
All right. Well, I don't remember how many bills exactly we have to kind of march through this morning. Some of them will go pretty quickly, but we just want y'all to get a flavor that there were some really good legislators tried so many different angles to get bills passed that would protect the right of citizens and property owners against eminent domain, against carbon capture and sequestration. And we just want you to see the determination with which they were met with opposition. And so that's kind of going to be the theme for today, I think. And the first bill, I think we may just go through these in numerical order for no good reason, but House Bill 5, Chris, by Representative Mike Johnson, who really took some arrows this session, and this bill would have given governing authorities and parishes the right to decide if they wanted carbon capture and sequestration in their parish. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And it would have been, it would have applied to every parish in the state of Louisiana. It would have just given local municipal authorities, local governments, the ultimate authority to make this decision, notwithstanding any inclinations or any permits or regulations imposed by the state. So, great bill if you're a constitutional conservative and you believe in principles of subsidiarity, that the government that's closest to the people governs most effectively. Everybody should have been for this bill. Why not allow local governments to make this decision about something of this magnitude? But of course, and it's the usual suspects, Danielle, killed in the House Natural Resources Committee, HB 5 by Mike Johnson.
Yeah. Do you want me to list them out, Chris?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the people who voted against the people's right to self-determination at the parish level were Ken Brass, Jacob Broad, Jessica Domingue, Travis Johnson, Jacob Landry, Joe Angeron, Neil Reiser, Paul Sawyer, and Z. Zarang.
The same suspects, the same ones that have killed every other bill designed to protect local governments, local citizens, and local property owners from this menace, this CCS menace. It's always the same people. Every now and then, we'll notice, Danielle, one or two of them may be absent to avoid a particularly controversial vote, but none of them have ever supported the legislation that would protect landowners from this. None of them. And most of them have always voted against it.
And we did not put in our list for today, Chris, the individual parish bills that would have done the same thing. So there were a number of legislators who were really concerned about this, particularly because it's coming to their parish. So they put forward bills that, should this bill have failed, which it ultimately did, perhaps they could get a carve out for their own parish. So I believe it was Rapides Parish, Sabine Parish, maybe Grant Parish. There were a handful of them, maybe as many as 5 or 6 of those. And do you happen to know? I mean, all of those failed. I don't know if
they did.
Did any of them get a vote?
I don't even know if they got a vote, but it was just a repeat from last year, Danielle, and it was generally the same parishes. So, as a fallback to the failure of HB 5, individual legislators brought bills that would grant local autonomy on this just to the parishes that they represent individually. And all of those failed. Either were not called for a vote or were defeated in the House Natural Resources Committee.
Yeah. And the next bill that's on our list is one that's already in the chat by Donna. Donna, I'm going to get to you real quick. Good morning, and thanks for joining. Thanks for chatting in.
Hey, Donna.
So, House Bill 7 by Representative Mike Johnson. This is, without a doubt, the most important bill of session, especially with respect to private property rights. It had a companion bill in the Senate Bill 60 by Senator Bill Wheat that never even saw the light of day. But the House Natural Resources Committee, I mean, Chris, this was a hearing that lasted several hours, maybe 4.5, 5 hours. It was particularly brutal. And we'll just list out the people who killed this bill. But maybe, do you want to talk a little bit more about why HB 7 was so important to pass?
Very briefly, HB 7 and SB 60, I call those the twin nuclear options this legislative session. And so important because these bills, HB 7 and SB 60, would have repealed entirely the right of any private corporation to seize private property for the purpose of carbon capture sequestration, pipelines, or the permanent geologic storage of CO2 waste. If a property owner does not want this on their property, it doesn't come on their property.
Yeah.
Boom. And importantly, it would have had retroactive application, which means that looking back, it would have nullified any permits that had already been issued or were in process. So this was an absolutely devastating bill if it had gone through and passed to the carbon capture and sequestration industry. Unfortunately, after a very protracted hearing, as you said, Danielle, it was killed in the House Natural Resources Committee.
Yeah. And Chris, as we go along, please pipe up on the ones that you testified either for or against, because I
Sure,
think that's
absolutely.
important for people to know. Did you get the opportunity to testify on this one? There were so many people who testified. I think you may have actually just let other people go.
I was down there. Everybody knew that I was there, and everybody knew what our position is on it. But there were
Yeah.
so many people who wanted to testify. I was in the committee room, in and out of there, but didn't actually testify. But there was no
Yeah.
question about what our position was on this.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the folks who voted, I'll list out the people who voted for the rights of property owners first. These are the people who voted the correct way. And that is DeWitt Carrier, Kim Coates, Jason DeWitt, Brett Guyman, Shane Mack, Danny McCormick, and Lauren Ventrella. The people who voted against people's private property rights, the core constitutional right set out in the Bill of Rights, set out in the very first instance. Ken Brass, Jacob Broad, Marcus Bryant, Jessica Domingue, Travis Johnson, Tim Kerner, Jeremy Lacombe, Jacob Landry, Joe Angeron, Neil Reiser, Paul Sawyer, and Z Zarang. So
Yeah.
if y'all are listening and y'all are able to chat in, why don't you just chat in and let us know which side of the issue your representative fell on if they were if they happened to sit in House Natural Resources Committee. I'd be interested to hear. And Donna says Representative Shane Mack voted for HB 7. Now he's endorsing Julia Letlow, telling his voters she is against CCS. Make it make sense. It's a great point, Donna. Great point. I don't know if you have
Excellent
anything
point.
you want to add to that, Chris.
Well, I was aware. I absolutely was aware of that, and I think it's very perplexing. Very perplexing in light of Representative Mack's emotional support of HB 7 and the
Yeah.
direct threat to his own family property. I thought that was very incongruous that he would then go and endorse Congressman Julia Letlow. Anyway, that I wanted to mention about HB 7 here again, Danielle. The reason why this is so insulting is that Mike Johnson was not asking the legislature to do anything that is not already codified in the Louisiana
That's right.
Constitution, as affirmed and ratified in March by our own Louisiana Supreme Court. All he was doing was asking for the legislature to codify basic private property protections. So the legislature is already on notice that ultimately a property owner will be vindicated when one of these CCS hustlers wants to take their property. But the difference is now, because of the legislature's failure to pass HB 7, they're going to have to spend about $100,000 and hire a lawyer and go through a protracted and very stressful civil proceeding in order to get the relief that the Constitution already entitles them to. That is why this is so reprehensibly insulting.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And you know, Chris, maybe an interesting idea for legislation going forward that would put some checks on the looseness with which the legislature deals with our rights is, let's say there's a lawsuit that has to go forward like this, and the Supreme Court ultimately says, you know what, you guys passed an illegal law. You knew you passed an illegal law because we can look at the testimony of the hearing that day, and we know that you missed the opportunity to rectify, to change course. So therefore, you members of the committee, you get to pay for this lawsuit. How would that?
Great point. I think that would be beautiful. I would help draft that, Danielle.
Yeah.
We could call it the actual or constructive notice standard. If you knew or reasonably should have known at the time that you failed to protect citizens against unconstitutional encroachments, if you knew or should have known that your actions violated the Constitution and a citizen has to sue ultimately to be granted relief by a court, you get to pay every dime of attorney's fees and all of their costs because of your
Personally,
gross, yeah, because of your gross dereliction of your public responsibility to the citizens. How about that for a piece of legislation? And I bet you that would change some of the votes of these committee members.
I
Danielle, that's absolutely brilliant. And I don't think it's hyperbole.
I
I
don't think
think
it
that
is
that is
either.
something that should occur.
I think so too, Chris. And I think we would see vastly different outcomes. I bet we would see a lot less legislation get filed. And I guess we would also see people maybe more carefully read what it is they're voting for.
You know, one thing we would see different? I guarantee you, if we pass this law right here, every single one of those legislators would be walking around down there with a copy of the Pocket Constitutionalist. And I guarantee you, you'd see a whole lot more of them thumbing through the Constitution while they were up there considering legislation. How about that?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right. Well, maybe that's our big stick we need
I
to.
think, Danielle, I think that's brilliant as usual.
Thanks. All right. House Bill 37, Chris. This was by Representative Chuck Owen. It would have prohibited expropriation of property by foreign companies. This
Yeah.
was voluntarily deferred in House Civil Law and Procedure.
No vote. I have great respect for Representative Owen, but this bill really wouldn't have done much. It would have prohibited foreign entities from seizing property for carbon capture and sequestration. But most of the people who, first of all, the overwhelming majority of the CCS companies who are challenging people's property, want to take their property, are either domestic companies or they have at least a domestic presence. So they qualify as a transnational organization, and therefore this bill wouldn't do anything to protect them. Most of them are domestic corporations. So the bill, I understand the intent of it, but really would not have been effective in really doing anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Next up, House Bill 79 by Representative Robbie Carter, who has surged to be one of my favorite and of this session, and frankly, someone I'm viewing as a hero. He brought a bill that was going to actually I think this one may have passed, Chris. House Bill 79 was about
That's good.
recovery of damages in case of a CCS related accident. So this is
Yeah.
about something blows up on your property or somewhere near you and it causes harm to you, your family members, or your property. The company now has to pay you for that.
Yes. So prior to this, Danielle, not only do corporations have the right to take your property, contaminate your water aquifers, steal your tax dollars for this scam, if there's an accident that causes catastrophic injury or damages to a family member or a friend as a result of this, you're statutorily capped in the amount of general damages that you can sue and recover for. $250,000 per person, $500,000 per person if it causes the death or a catastrophic injury to someone. So you talk about an insult. Not only are we going to give you absolutely no control over your own property and your own health, if we cause a problem that causes an injury to one of your family members, we're going to cap the amount of money that you can sue one of these CCS hustlers for and recover. That's an insult. So Representative Carter's bill removes those caps, and I would suggest, Danielle, it's one of the few silver linings of all the legislation that went through the legislature this session. Those caps have been removed, so if a landowner or a family member or any third party is injured through a pipeline burst or rupture or any kind of CCS leakage, then they can sue, and there is no limit on the amount of money that they can recover. So Representative Carter's a very, very good bill. I will say this, there was an effort in the Senate committee to amend this and to impose a more generous cap, but still a cap. But fortunately, the bill survived intact.
It did, and there were two. The general outcome of it was that it was a party line vote. Two Republicans in the House voted against it. They are Joe Engeron and Mark Wright, and then five Democrats who voted in favor of it. It was Darrell Adams, Robbie Carter, who's the author of the bill, Dana Henry, Stephen Jackson, and Mandy Landry.
Darrell meaning Roy Adams, right?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and so we mentioned him the other day. So we always want to applaud Democrats who do the right thing. I'm glad you mentioned them, and I want to particularly emphasize Orgeron and Mark Wright, who, for some inexplicable reason, still apparently think it's appropriate to impose statutory caps on property owners and third parties who are injured, even catastrophically, through a CCS accident. I think that is really, really unfortunate that any Republican would have voted against this bill.
Yeah, I agree with that, Chris. And I just dropped my latest article on carbon capture and sequestration in the chat. It got picked up yesterday by Joe Hoft and his brother Jim over at the Gateway Pundit. Would love for y'all to take a look at this because this is telling the story of what is happening in our state. And it's a bigger picture than just Louisiana as well. And it's also casting a vision, right? Because part of what the legislators have said going into this session, Chris, is that we have to have carbon capture and sequestration. That is the wave of the future. Some of the arguments are, well, Europe demands it, and we need to sell our LNG to Europe. Therefore, we have to have a lower carbon footprint, and CCS is the way to accomplish that. Well, first of all, there are a lot of assumptions in that line of reasoning that are flat out wrong. We don't have to sell to Europe. We don't have to bow to Europe's demands. Europe is not the only place in the world that can use our liquefied natural gas. In fact, we could use it here at home. We could sell it domestically. We could sell it to South Korea. We could sell it to any number of places. But Europe is not in a position right now to be making any demands because they are suffering pretty significantly with what's going on in Iran. And they don't really get to call the shots with President Trump in office. So no, we don't have to bow to the ESG demands. And the other piece of that is this is really an attack on our ability to produce oil and gas at home. Because one of the things that has come out, and I drew it out in this series, is the very places that they are targeting to deposit this toxic waste, pressurized carbon dioxide under the ground, is the same place that the largest natural gas find in a decade in the U.S. is. And since in Louisiana, there's no law, there's no provision of law, you correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, there's no provision of law that gives primacy to mineral rights over CCS. So that means that if CCS projects are underway and it gets in the way of recovering real gas that would produce real money and real jobs instead of fake money and fake jobs, that's part of the Ponzi scheme of the 45Q tax credits and the carbon credits from Vanguard and whoever else. So we can't actually use our own natural resources because of what they're doing. That is a war on our ability to produce energy. That's a war on our own national security, military readiness. And so to me, people may say, oh, well, we're not into the climate scam. This is much bigger than just a climate scam. This is an attack on our ability to create wealth and to protect the future of this state economically.
Absolutely, 100%. And there was a bill this session that we'll get to that would have directly addressed that issue, at least in terms of the compensation owed to a property owner whose oil and gas and minerals on his own property are rendered inaccessible because of these CCS plumes in his pore space. That was a bill that would have addressed that, and we'll get to it. Don't get me started until we get there. But Danielle, there's one bill that I wanted to mention that's not on our sheet, but I went when I was going through this last night. It was a bill, it was sort of a companion bill to Robbie Carter's, the bill that removes the statutory cap on damages
Yeah.
for CCS, and it's his HB 80, which would have imposed a strict liability standard on these corporations in the event of an accident. In other words, if there is an accident caused by something that you installed or that you fitted or that you caused by your infrastructure that harms someone, you are strictly liable. A plaintiff does not have to go into court and hire, $50,000 worth of experts in order to prove your liability. You are presumed to be liable, strictly liable. And I think it was a very, very good bill, of course. And as you might imagine, Danielle, was not even granted a hearing in the House Natural Resources Committee. So I just wanted to bring that up, both so that you could further solidify your respect for Representative Carter and further solidify perhaps a little bit of animus toward the House Natural Resources Committee for not giving this a hearing.
Yeah. I don't know if it could be any further solidified, Chris, on the animus side.
Right, exactly. Boom.
I did have some other brilliant point I was going to make, but it'll have to recirculate. I don't know exactly what it was right now. I see a chat here on Rumble from Walter Beach. Good morning, Walter. Thanks for tuning in. He says, FYI, Governor Jeff Landry announced to the senators that if the people don't want it, he will pull the permit. He pulled the Lake Maurepas permit. He's not had time to look it up, and that he can't see anything in writing. Well, that's encouraging, but we believe in actions over words. So we will see what Governor Landry does. We know that his actions and his words have often been divergent.
Yeah, Walter is right though, and there was a meeting also months and months ago from big landowners in Louisiana with Governor Landry, and Governor Landry told them at that meeting that if you don't want it, you don't get it. Well, if that's the case, then I guess
put it in law.
Put it in law. Put it in law. If that's the case, why don't you support bills that basically codify in law exactly what you told them? But you're always silent. Governor Landry was, by the way, 100% silent on all of these items of legislation that we're going to go through, and some we have gone through to protect communities and property owners. Did not say a word about it. And publicly did not say a word about it, which leads us to the inescapable inference that Governor Landry either supports this, which we know he does, or just doesn't have the backbone to stand up. Either way, it's absolutely deplorable. But what we know that he's neck deep in it, so that's why he's not doing anything to support this legislation.
And my point earlier recirculated, Chris. So I'll mention it before we move on, which is not only are we having our property robbed out from underneath our feet, so that's something we're paying for. Not only are we paying for the 45Q tax credits, not only are these CCS companies not paying any taxes to support the local communities that they're destroying, but the liability is also on the people. So I don't know how many different ways we can pay for this crap, but every possible way we are paying for it.
Yes, and I need to clarify this point. When this CCS scam was originally enacted in Louisiana, there was a 10-year limit on the corporations who did this. After 10 years, as long as they followed the proper protocols, closed things out the right way, after 10 years, there is no liability on these multi-billion-dollar corporations anymore, and the liability transfers to the state. Most recently, either in 23 or 24, that was amended to make it 50 years. So now 50 years after the project is complete and the corporations close this out, if my grandkid is severely injured by a pipeline rupture, that company who did this, or their subsidiary company, is no longer responsible. No liability whatsoever. It all transfers to the state, which means that if you've got to sue somebody, you sue the state, which means we're paying for it. We're paying, the tax dollars are paying for liability because of the negligence of a CCS company that long ago skipped town and by law, by Louisiana law, no longer has any statutory liability. That is a reprehensible insult to property owners, Danielle. 50 years is not a long time when you're talking about the effects. These pipelines and the storage of this CO2 is not going away after 50 years. And there's absolutely no reason to
In
believe
fact, the
that
vulnerability increases, right?
increases over time. So basically, there's a disproportionate relationship between the increased jeopardy that is being imposed on the citizens because of this accident and their degree of liability. Their degree of liability goes down as the
Risk goes up.
likelihood of an accident or a pipeline rupture goes
Yeah.
up. And then after 50 years, there is no more liability. It goes to the state, which means our state's broke anyway. And by the way, the only money our state has is money that we pay. So indirectly, after 50 years, a landowner who's been injured because of the negligence of a corporation in these CCS pipelines will indirectly be paying for their own civil recovery
Right.
because of the negligence of a corporation.
Yeah. And look, history repeats itself or doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. I mean, if people have problems with the orphaned wells across Louisiana that do pose a significant risk not only to the environment but to the people who unwittingly go around these wells, they're uncapped, and they may be, emitting some kind of odorless, perhaps, or certainly invisible gas that's toxic. People are reporting this online that they're going fishing down near where I am, and they know that they're going fishing at where old wells were, because that's where the fish go, and they've gotten sick. They've gotten very, very sick and had to detox from that. They had to go to the ER. So imagine, folks. Imagine this is we already have our warning, and we already have seen how the state has treated those orphaned wells, which is as if they don't exist, right? The oil and gas companies have had almost no liability over the problems, the messes that they've created in the Gulf and in the inland waters. So I just hello, wake up. I guess that's my point. The state is doing no more to protect us now than it has done thus far when it comes to oil and gas, even though there's every opportunity to make sure that that happens.
Exactly. I can't say it any better than that.
All right, Chris. Well, let's move on to House Bill 180. This one was by Representative Chuck Owen. I don't think we talked about this one yet. This one is a bill that prohibits expropriation of private property by foreign adversaries for the purpose of CCS.
So we had one, Danielle, that was foreign companies. Generally, this is
Yeah.
foreign adversaries or any agent of a foreign adversary cannot expropriate private property for any purpose, which would include carbon capture and sequestration. The issue is, as I mentioned earlier, Danielle, is that most of the corporations who are engaged in this, most of the expropriations or projects that are being challenged in Louisiana are being conducted, empowered, and implemented by either domestic corporations or transnational corporations that have that are domiciled in somewhere in the United States of America. So this really doesn't do anything to impede the progression of these projects with regard to ownership of the companies. Again, I understand Representative Owen's intent, but just based upon the unlikely scenario that this bill would have done some good, it was just to be on the safe side. It was either killed or not heard, right?
No.
No, this actually was passed. Yeah,
This one passed. This one has gone to the
Yeah.
governor for signature, and it passed. It passed completely unanimously. But like you said, Chris, and what we were discussing pre-show is this is kind of like, I feel like these legislators who are trying to do the best for the people that sent them there, that sent them to the legislature, They have just thrown the kitchen sink out to see what in the world they could possibly do that would stick. And so to me, this isn't necessarily the bill on its face. No, it doesn't do much. I think there are other bills we
Right.
discussed that really kind of cover this. So it's probably not a necessary bill, which is probably why it passed in the first place. But I think part of it is testing the limits. Like, how far are these people in House Natural Resources and Civil Law and Procedure willing to go for this CCS racket that is really damaging our state? Are they going to go? Are they going to allow foreign companies? Are they going to allow foreign adversaries? Are they going to allow, Satan himself to come and steal your property? Like, how far? What will they vote for?
Exactly, Danielle, and I'm so glad you brought the point up about Chuck Owen, and it applies to other reps as well. Uh, you know, Clearly he was doing just that, trying to find some mechanism to slow down this menacing freight train, and using any opportunity he
Yeah.
can to do that. And my only point is that most of these corporations who are engaged in this are transnational corporations that are domiciled in a friendly country. And so, prohibiting foreign adversaries or agents of foreign adversaries from expropriating property really doesn't touch this very, very much. But again, I know Representative Owen was trying to do something to get us out from under this. So
Yeah.
I admire him for that.
Yeah, and his next bill was House Bill 327, or the next bill of his that we're going to discuss, and it declares that carbon dioxide sequestration is illegal without a property owner's consent. Now, that sounds pretty simple and straightforward, and perhaps like it's something that should not have a problem in America, but it was never even brought up for a hearing in House Natural Resources.
Yeah, and this was co-authored by Danny McCormick, which
Okay.
doesn't surprise anyone.
Right.
McCormick might have been I don't know if he's listed as the main author, but anyway, there's a co-author on it, and that's exactly right. It's a sweeping ban. It says, notwithstanding any provision of law to the contrary, CCS beneath private property without property owner's consent is illegal unless you made a diligent search and you can't find the property owner. Very strong piece of legislation designed to protect the pore space under people's property. And as you said, didn't get a hearing. Absolutely no surprise there.
Yeah. The next one is House Bill 449 by Representative Brett Guyman, the chairman of House Natural Resources Committee, I might add. And this bill would have required expropriating authorities to pay the court costs of expropriation proceedings, but it was never heard in House Civil Law and Procedure.
Danielle, I feel fortunately or unfortunately, I absolutely feel a rant coming on here.
All right.
HB 449, right now in Louisiana, if a property owner disputes the value of his property and doesn't think that property that is being taken from him, doesn't think he's being compensated appropriately for that seizure, and they have to sue him in court to force him to accept the amount of money that they want. They have a value dispute in court. Right now, no matter what happens, and let's say the judge ends up awarding an amount that is equal or less than what the company was offering the landowner. Okay, so the landowner says my property is worth $100,000. The corporation says, sorry, we're going to offer you 50 for it. We think that's fair. Property owner says no, so they have to go to court. If the court awards the property owner $50,000 or less, then the property owner gets to pay all of the court costs of the corporation that brought the suit. The same corporation that is already seizing his property, the property owner gets to pay all their court costs. So Brett Guyman's bill would have said, no matter what happens, if you're going to seize someone's property, expropriate someone's private property, and they don't agree with the value that you're putting on it, and you have to go to court, no matter what happens in court, this property owner should never, ever have to pay one dime of a multi-billion-dollar corporation's court costs for this. You talk about absolutely infuriating that a bill like this would die. A bill like this would die. That a multi-billion-dollar corporation gets their costs paid by an aggrieved landowner in court who's having his property seized from him. They can't even pass this. Did this even get a vote? Did HB 449 get a vote?
No, it never had a hearing.
And no vote, to add insult to injury, no vote in the House Natural Resources Committee to at least force these rhinos to go on the record and decide this issue where you stand on it. Danielle,
It was House Civil Law and Procedure, Chris,
Okay.
just to clear the record
House
on
Civil
that.
Law, House Civil Law and Procedure. Whoever the hell the rhinos are, who is, I guess
I
since
just
wasn't
looked it up.
called, it doesn't matter.
I just looked it up. Nicholas Muscarello is the chair of House Civil Law and Procedure.
I would ask Representative Muscarella, why didn't you call this bill in your committee? Why didn't you force your committee to move a bill that will finally prohibit corporations from taxing their court costs onto a private property owner who's already having his property seized just because that property owner disputes the amount that the corporation wants to pay him for it? You don't think that this is a significant enough bill to call for a vote in your committee? Just no vote? No vote whatsoever. I guess it doesn't matter, Danielle. It just sure as hell doesn't matter that small property owners are going to be taxed with these costs in court over this.
And Chris, maybe this is an opportune moment for us to talk about some of the he said, she said kind of things that went on behind the scenes this session. And I don't know if you feel comfortable even revealing this. So if you don't, we can move on. But for instance, there was a bill, another bill, and maybe we don't even need to name the bill. Maybe we do, that would have been going before the Senate Natural Resources Committee. And there was a little bit of finger pointing in the aftermath because a certain bill never got called. And there were some questions. Well, did the author of the bill not push hard enough, or did the chairman of the bill block it? The chairman of the committee block it? Do you have any insight into who are the blockers that we're looking at?
I know on very, very good authority, I don't have to say where it came from, I know on very good authority that there was a dispute between Bill Wheat, the author of SB 60, which was the companion bill that would have repealed eminent domain for CCS, and the chairman of the Senate Natural Resources Committee, Bob Hensgens. One says that Hensgens wouldn't call it. Hensgens says that Wheat never asked for the bill to be called. But you know what, Danielle? Who the hell cares? Who the hell cares? These are both conservative Republicans, both of whom ran on platforms of constitutional conservatism and protection of private property rights. This trying to blame, both of them should be standing in there fighting for this and making sure that this passes. I don't give a damn which one of them is responsible for the failure of this bill. They're both responsible for it. Along with our governor, who has been as quiet as a church mouse in support and failing to support bills like SB 60 and bills like HB 7. So quite frankly, Danielle, I don't give a tinker's damn what the dispute was between Bill Wheat and Bob Hensgens. They're both Republicans. They both should be honoring their constitutional duty to the public, and they both miserably failed on SB 60.
Yeah. And I don't know if just because the governor was silent publicly on this, as far as I'm concerned, silence is assent at this point. You know, if you are someone who has even a hint of concern about carbon capture and sequestration and the evils that it poses to this state, if you have some hint of concern for the citizens of this state and what they actually want, the people who put you there, then you speak up and you say something. If you don't, then you are driving this train forward. And look, Chris, I can make an assumption here. Governor Landry's getting up there talking about all the economic development that's happening in this state on his watch. Well, this is not the kind of economic development that we're looking for. If you, Governor Landry, are really interested in economic development, why aren't you encouraging companies to build refineries here whenever there are refineries closing all the time in California that is going to put our national security at great risk? Why are you not foreclosing on the legacy lawsuits. Okay, there's a bill passed, I believe, last year, maybe the year before, to put an end to the legacy lawsuits, but it doesn't even come into effect until 2027. If you really cared about righting the wrongs of Bell Edwards and attracting oil and gas companies, refining companies to this state with reasonable expectations that, hey, that we're not going to act like that anymore. We're not going to, pursue you with lawsuits until kingdom come, then maybe that would be something you could do. Maybe you would be spending your time courting the kind of companies that will actually create jobs, create real economic development, create income, and create tax revenue. It seems to me that the governor is giving away the farm.
Exactly. We need a governor who is going to promote oil and gas development in Louisiana, which we all need and which we all support, and kick carbon capture and sequestration to the curb. There's no reason for us to be bowing to European bureaucrats and their, globalist climate concerns, which have been debunked across the board. So we're going to bow to them and do this CCS. Why are we doing it? I love your piece, Danielle, and what you're developing is that there is no reason and no incentive for us to be doing this. In fact, there's a great incentive for us to kick the CCS to the curb and focus exclusively on real oil and gas development, which you and I both support wholeheartedly.
And not the kind of oil and gas that was done in the past, right? Because there were companies that were permitted to take great advantage of our state, take great advantage of our wetlands, and leave a big mess behind that we're still suffering from today. So that's not the kind of development, that's not the kind of oil and gas that we expect or want to come to the state. We want responsible development that's not going to be another industrial waste zone on Cancer Alley. We want companies who are going to take care of the people, who care about the people, but who are also going to bring significant resources to bear.
And there's no reason why you can't do both. There's no
Right.
reason why we can't protect
The
our
technology
coast.
exists. The
Yes,
technology does
yes,
exist.
and protect our environment without carbon capture and sequestration. I agree, Danielle, there should be liability anytime an oil company commits that type of negligence, and they should be held responsible for it. One of the issues is that of all the millions and millions of dollars that have been awarded in these legacy lawsuits, I don't know that any of it has gone to administrative cleanup. I don't know that any of it has actually gone to try to rehabilitate the damage that has been done. I mean, I think most of it has gone into the pockets of plaintiffs' lawyers. And I don't have anything against plaintiffs' lawyers, but this just seems like such an absolute racket that's not really moving the needle as far as cleaning up the mess that's been made.
Yeah, yeah. And there has been some agreements made for them to do that, but I think it's been very limited, and I don't know that the full scope of what it is has been disclosed to the public, which is, to me, just the usual way, right? The public gets to suffer, but we don't get to know the outcomes.
Yes. Oh, yeah. The heralded non-disclosure agreements, Daniel.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and maybe that's a conversation for another day.
It is, probably. Okay, let's see. I do have a chat here from Facebook from Patricia. She says, how much was he paying each year on taxes? He should at least get paid what he has been charged for taxes. I'm thinking that must be with respect to the lawsuit, the pay, what you would pay for who owes the court for court costs or something? Or who owes the lawyer fees?
I think what Patricia's talking about is if there's an expropriation dispute and there's a property owner that's been paying property taxes every year for 20 years, that should be included in the amount that he's paid for expropriation of his property, because he wouldn't even own the property if he had not paid those property taxes for all those years. So that's something that absolutely should be included in any agreement between a landowner and a CCS company that wants to expropriate his property. I don't know if that's currently included or not. I couldn't get past the fact that a bill that would repeal the idea that a property owner has to pay the court costs of a corporation trying to seize his property would fail in our legislature. But I'd be glad to look at your question, Patricia, but I absolutely agree with you if I'm understanding your point correctly.
Yeah, and look, I think we all are well within our rights to hit the roof that our property could be taken in the first instance. So, I think it's a great point, but we need far, far more protection than that. But yeah, as a bare minimum, exactly, for crying out loud. I agree with you, Patricia. All right, House Bill 499 by Representative Danny McCormick. This establishes minimum per acre compensation for non-consenting landowners within a carbon dioxide storage unit. You can translate that into plain speak for us, Chris. But this is a bill he brought last year as well, right?
Yeah. You remember HB 75 last year, Danielle, which said that any property owner who does not voluntarily consent to have his property expropriated for carbon capture and sequestration and actually resists and actually fights it, but ultimately is forced into a unit, he cannot be penalized in any way insofar as the amount of money that he's compensated for his property. He has to be compensated at least in the same amount that any other highest paid property owner was compensated per capita who did volunteer for the unit. So it was a great bill by McCormick, HB 75 last year, that made it out of committee and made it to the House floor where it was killed. This year, HB 499, which is the identical legislation, did not even get a hearing in a committee. Is that right?
Correct. It was referred to House Natural Resources and never got picked up.
Never got picked up in committee. So at least with regard to the compensation a landowner gets being discriminated against if he actually tries to hold on to his property as long as he can, a bill to prohibit financial discrimination against him regressed 2 steps from last year. And that is indeed sad. House Natural Resources Committee wasn't called. Look, Representative Brett Guyman is the chairman. We're going to get to some other things involving Representative Guyman here. He's the chairman of that committee. I'd like to reach out to Representative Guyman and ask him why HB 499 was not called and heard in his committee. Brett, the functional equivalent of HB 75 from last year. I think it was an important piece of legislation, was never called, never voted on in committee. I'd like to know why.
And Chris, you correct me if I'm wrong. Last year in the 2025 regular session, Representative Guyman, I'm pretty sure you and I had a long phone conversation with him prior to session, and he let us know that he was going to run all of the CCS related bills in a single hearing, and that hearing, I believe, went until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, because he made sure that every single CCS related bill was heard in committee. This session, there was nothing like that. I think only a handful of bills even got brought up in committee.
Yes, and Representative Guyman was true to his word last year.
Yeah, he was. He absolutely was.
He was true to his word. All of the good CCS bills were at least called in committee. This year, not the case. A number of very important and even very similar legislation was not even called in the House Natural Resources Committee. And frankly, I think we deserve an explanation for why.
Yeah. Okay, House Bill 500, also by Representative Danny McCormick. Okay, this one, Chris, you will definitely have to translate, but it requires carbon capture storage unit operators to compensate non-consenting mineral owners within a unit for the value of stranded minerals or reimburse them for the additional costs required by the Department of Conservation and Energy to drill through the unit. I think this is something that you and I talked about up at the beginning of the show, right? This is the bill you were talking about that would protect people who may be in that Bossier Formation, for instance, where maybe there is oil and gas that could be recovered from your property. However,
Yes.
if they put CCS, if they put CCS in your pore space, and then they will be unable to drill through that to recover the gas. So you are out the money, the royalties from the oil and gas that would be recovered, or from the gas, rather, the natural gas that would be recovered from your property. And this bill would have protected you, right? But it's not going to protect you.
You're coming onto my property. You are injecting CO2, industrial waste, massive quantities, and if that plume that creates makes my minerals on my property, oil and gas that's on my property, to which I would otherwise be able to derive a benefit, if your activities make those minerals and oil inaccessible to me, then you have to compensate me full fair market value for the value of my property, to which you are rendering me not rendering inaccessible to me. Seems very, very fair, doesn't it, Danielle? Doesn't it seem very, very fair? Fair
It
market
does.
value?
It does. And what's really, really concerning about this, Chris, and I think this is something that our friends at Save My Louisiana will probably hit on, if they haven't already hit on the great work they're doing on social media to expose what all is going on with this. They don't even have to inject the CCS into your pore space. It can just move there. It can migrate there because
Oh,
there's
exactly.
nothing to constrain it, right? So let's say you don't even know that there's CCS that there is carbon dioxide, pressurized carbon dioxide that has crept into your pore space, right? You can be potentially miles away from this. And they go and they're like, oh, well, it looks like your property would be great to put a well on for recovering this natural gas. Look at this big check we'll write you every month with all these zeros. Oh, sorry, we can't tap into it. It looks like that CCS from 15 miles over there has come the carbon dioxide the plume has traversed under your property, and so we're sorry, we're just going to have to go down the road.
So even if a property owner agrees to the eminent domain, agrees to sign away his rights to his own minerals, you're saying that because this plume can migrate tens of thousands of acres eventually, could end up under someone else's property, rendering their access to their own minerals and oil and gas inaccessible to them, and even then they are not entitled. They would be entitled under this bill to be rendered fair market value for what they don't have access to anymore. This bill died. Did this bill get a vote?
Never heard
No
in
vote.
House Natural Resources.
No vote. Steal my property and don't even require that I'm made whole from what you're stealing from me. And even if I don't have anything to do with your sordid transaction, whereby you coerce another property owner that I don't even know to do this, and I'm indirectly affected by it and victimized by it, even then, I don't get compensated for the deprivation of my own oil and gas and my own mineral rights on my own property. And this
Correct.
doesn't get a vote in the House Natural Resources Committee.
No. Pretty amazing, huh?
Make it make sense.
Well, I think what makes sense is that there is a very coordinated attempt, Chris, and no one can convince me otherwise, to literally destroy our state. Why else would our elected officials be driving headlong into this? Okay, I believe that there are some people who are probably a little ignorant and not understanding of the significance of what this means. But after the hearing for House Bill 7, I don't think anybody in House Natural Resources gets a pass on what this really is. I don't think you can sit through that hearing and feel like, okay, well, all these people, all these really smart people, all of these really concerned people who come before me and state their claim, I know better than them. I actually know better than them. I mean, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are to look at the people of this state, some of whom sent you to the position, to the chair that you're sitting in, to look at them and say, I don't care about your property. I don't care about your family because I know better than you know.
Exactly. The arrogance of officialdom, as Cicero would say, Danielle. We are untouchable. We don't care about you. We have fallen in with the big money transnational corporations, and we don't give a shit about you. And quite frankly, we may act as though we do. One thing we can assure, Danielle, is that they may continue to act like this as long as they get away with it. But one thing they will no longer get away with is the covert discrepancy between what they do in the legislature and what they tell their constituents
That's
they're
right.
doing in the legislature. Constituents, you don't have any excuses anymore for not voting these people out of office. You no longer get to claim ignorance of this. If you ever did have a plausible excuse, you don't have it anymore. There is no reason for you not to know full well what your representative and senator is doing in the legislature and vote accordingly. You don't have any excuses left. And I don't say this to be harsh in any way, because I know people are doing the best that they can.
Yeah.
But you have to be informed about what's going on in our legislature, and we're here to inform you of it. We're spoon feeding it to you. All you have to do is act on it and vote accordingly. That is hugely important if we're ever going to change this. You can't stay apathetic anymore.
That's right. And you can't vote for people just because you went to high school with them or just because they are a good guy or they're a lot of fun at the crawfish ball. Like Chris and I were talking before the show, and this has been something that we've talked about at length, something that's really been on my mind, which is we cannot keep voting against our own interest. We cannot vote for people who are going to do this to us while we look at them, right? We cannot. We absolutely
Exactly.
cannot.
You can't do it anymore, Danielle. And honestly, if you want to know that what you just said is the very reason why, as a matter of policy, LeCAG doesn't form fraternal relationships with legislators. We don't go to dinner. We don't have cocktails with them as a general rule, because we don't want to form those type of relationships that would necessarily cause us to compromise our candor and compromise a fair and full and objective evaluation of what they're doing, because it's a lot more difficult to critique a friend than it is to critique someone you don't know well. And it's really for our own personal protection that we've established that policy. And I know it's just the opposite of the policy that every other lobbyist in Louisiana assumes, and just about every other person in the state who wants access to politicians. I don't want access to politicians. I would rather not even be around politicians. I would rather not have to have long conversations with politicians. That's my preference. And so it's really not that difficult for me to do this. But our policy on this, what I'm saying is, runs very counter to the prevailing practice.
Yeah. Yeah. And we didn't want to have this conversation today. I mean, we would much rather not have this conversation today, but it's too important to leave it on the table. It's too important to leave it unsaid. And when people's property and the future of the state are on the line, we have to come out and say exactly what happened.
We have to do it. We absolutely have to do it, because otherwise we're not being faithful to the commitment that we made to the citizens of our state, and they are our loyalty. I don't care, Danielle, as you said, I don't care who you went to high school with. I don't care how long you've been friends with someone. Nobody knows how you vote when you go into a voting booth. You don't have to tell them how you vote, quite frankly. There's really no skin off your back, but you have a responsibility to vote consistent with your long-term interests. And that's what we expect you to do and hope you would do, if we're going to return the government to where it needs to be.
Yeah, amen. All right, next up, House Bill 509 by Representative Chuck Owen, and we still have we have a couple left, so y'all just stick with us because this is important, folks. By Representative Chuck Owen, this requires a hearing to receive public comments in every parish in which a Class 5 or 6 injection well permit is proposed. So they say that we're going to put CCS in your parish. So this bill is just, all it does is say we have to have a public hearing if it's coming to our parish. Is that right, Chris?
That's all it does. It doesn't do anything to stop the freight train. It just allows the public to go before, it requires the corporations to listen to public input so the public can air out their grievances and their concerns, but it doesn't impose any legal impediments on the development of CCS in Louisiana. So I guess this bill is designed to sort of give effect to a bill that was passed last year requiring CCS companies to give substantial consideration to local concerns. So really, I think it's just throwing a bone to the dog here. Ultimately, okay, we'll sit here and listen to you and patronize you, whatever, but that's not going to stop us from doing anything we want to do. I get the purpose of the bill. Sometimes people just want to go and be heard. I get it. But the bill doesn't do anything, unfortunately, to actually stop this from occurring in Louisiana. Just being straight.
Yeah, well, even though it doesn't do anything, there were still members of the House Natural Resources Committee that voted against it, Chris. So what they voted against was allowing the people to look face to face with some of these CCS companies that are coming in and taking their property and have a public hearing. But there were several members of the legislature, the
Wow.
House Natural Resources Committee, who says, no, you don't need to have that opportunity. There doesn't need to be a public grievance session, even though we're coming here to destroy everything you've worked to build. And those
Wow.
people are Ken Brass, Jacob Broad, Jessica Domingue, Travis Johnson, Joe Angeron, Neil Reiser, Paul Sawyer, and Z Zarang.
So even though these public meetings and public hearings would have absolutely no ultimate effect on the development of CCS in Louisiana, but it would give local citizens the opportunity to express their concerns in an open and real way directly in front of the people who want to impose this on them. And they couldn't even vote for that.
Correct. Couldn't.
Wow.
Could not. Now, what's very interesting and I think very telling, Chris, is that it passed 94-0 on the House floor. So all of these people whose names I just mentioned in House Natural Resources that didn't want this to see the light of day suddenly had a different vote when it got onto the House floor. What do you make of that?
I think it's very, very interesting, and I think it's the very reason why sometimes these bills are killed in House Natural Resources Committee, and these diehard anti-CCS people in House Natural Resources Committee, whose names are already written in effigy, and they really don't have anything to lose at this point, trying to protect their friends on the House floor because they don't want other rhinos to be put in a position where they actually have to vote on something that could cause them to look bad. So they just keep them from ever having to make the choice. It's a favor that they do for other rhinos, so that other rhinos will then do a favor for them perhaps in the future. That's what's going on here.
And there's something else that's going on here, which was part of the reason that you take the tack you do with LeCag, and it's part of the reason that I think we have become a voice to listen to, which is so many organizations that do these scorecards, lobby, others, the NRA, the pro-life organizations, only look at the votes taken on the House floor. So if you want to get your shiny gold star from some of these big name organizations, you vote the right way when it comes to the House floor, but you can do whatever you want in committee. Enter LeCag on the scene. And that's when you started holding these people accountable, Chris, and saying, not on my watch. Just because you think that nobody's watching, we're going to say exactly how you voted in committee. We're going to say what you didn't allow to get passed in committee, what never even got voice for a hearing in committee. And that's exactly why we're doing what we're doing today, because they try and cover up their dirty deeds in committee.
Right. So a huge issue, Danielle, that you just brought up. How can you tell me that if you're an organization that is doing scorecards for legislators, how can you do a meaningful scorecard if you're not including in that scorecard all the good bills that were never called before a committee? And how do you not hold a chairman of a committee and perhaps other committee members and the Speaker of the House and the governor responsible in a scorecard for the fact that those bills were not called before a committee. I just don't understand it. I don't understand how you can even expect to have a complete scorecard. How can you not include in a scorecard the bills that made it out of committee but were killed on a House floor or allowed to die on a House or Senate floor? And how do you not hold the Senate president responsible for that, or the House Speaker responsible for these things? How can you purport to do a meaningful scorecard when you have committee members who duck out at very convenient times so they can avoid a controversial vote that results in the failure of a bill or the passage of a bad bill? There are all kinds of things, Danielle. If all you're looking at is the actual formal record floor votes in the House and the Senate, and you're basing a scorecard on that, that's about 30%, 40%, 50% maybe of the whole big picture view. And all of these factors should be considered when you're doing a scorecard on a legislator. They have to be.
100%, 100%. They're missing almost the entire picture, the entire story of the session if all they look at is those final votes.
Exactly.
All right, House Bill 510 by Representative Rodney Shammerhorn, and this one prohibits the importation of captured carbon dioxide into Louisiana for sequestration. And this is something we've been talking about, Chris, that the powers that be in this state have set Louisiana up to be a dumping ground, to be the garbage can for the entire country and even beyond, because it sounds like Japan, according to Gary Musgrove, may be looking at bringing their captured carbon dioxide to bury under our ground. Can we talk about how insane that is?
Absolutely extraordinary. So when you hear people say they want to make Louisiana the dumping ground for CO2 industrial waste, this right here proves it. Rodney Shammerhorn's bill would have said, okay, if you're going to do this, could you at least limit the industrial CO2 waste that you're burying under our property to waste generated within our own state? Do we also have to take on the waste generated in Texas or Missouri and Japan? This bill would have prohibited that, very appropriately so. And I don't know, did this bill get a vote in the House Natural Resources Committee, Danielle?
He voluntarily deferred it, so
Okay.
there must have been such significant opposition from the committee that he just said, he knew he wasn't going to get anywhere.
Yeah, I don't blame Rodney Shammerhorn for this. I would say that anytime you can do this, please force a vote, please force a vote, please force a vote, because those votes are very, very valuable to us because they're record votes and we can use them. But I certainly understand that if he's sitting there saying there's no possible way. But do you understand, Danielle, that a bill that simply would say, please, could you just limit what we have to absorb to waste that we produce here in our own state and let other states and other countries handle their own CO2 waste? That's what this bill would have done, and didn't get a vote in Brett Guyman's House Natural Resources Committee. I think that's despicable, quite frankly.
It is. It is despicable, Chris. It's mind-blowing. All right. House Bill 566 by Representative Chuck Owen prohibits use of state funds in support of net zero greenhouse gas emissions policies. I really loved the tack he took, and I think this bill, Chris, shows exactly what we were talking about at the top of the show, which is this is a kitchen sink approach. You know that the folks that are sitting on these committees in large part have been put there because they will vote this stuff down. And so I know Representative Owen was so creative. I think Representative Danny McCormick was so creative. There were a number of them who were very creative and tried many ways to see if there was anything that they could do to mitigate the full force, full speed ahead train that is carbon capture and sequestration and eminent domain for carbon capture and sequestration in this state. Unfortunately,
I love this bill, Danielle. Absolutely loved this bill, and I thought it was just outstanding to basically say that not one dime of state resources can be dedicated directly or indirectly to any goals, to any plans or projects or goals whose ultimate objective is net zero greenhouse gas emission goals, which, if you recall, Danielle, is the whole purpose originally of carbon capture and sequestration. So this bill would have said, we will not devote one dime, which basically, and that includes administrative costs. So guess what? The Louisiana Department of Natural Resources could not devote any administrative personnel to this. This hoax of a climate review board or whatever that was done a couple of years ago, bye-bye to that. So basically, do whatever you want, but guess what? You don't get to spend any taxpayer money on it. This would have indirectly decapitated carbon capture and sequestration in the state of Louisiana, because it would have eviscerated any administrative personnel to be used toward it. I don't know, did this get a vote?
Voluntarily deferred in House appropriations. And this was another point that we were making this morning, which is we know that House Natural Resources is a adversarial committee for this issue. So we've seen people try and get things through civil law and procedure and now appropriations. To no effect ultimately, but I do want their efforts to be noted, their creativity to be noted, because for crying out loud, this was not, let me just shove one bill that people are breathing down my neck on this issue. Let me just put one bill together, and whether it gets called or not, I don't care. That's not what I'm seeing from Representative Owens. That's not what I'm seeing from Representative McCormick. It's not what I'm seeing from a number of people, Representative Shammerhorn, even Representative Johnson. I don't think that's what we're seeing from those folks.
Well, my only admonition would be that I very much appreciate your bringing the bills. These are good bills. But if you're going to bring a bill to a committee, I would strongly urge you to either require a vote on it or strongly urge a vote on it, even if it's to involuntarily defer it. Whatever, but to go in and voluntarily defer legislation, without any fight, I think is unfortunate. And again, I'm not saying that this is a pattern with these guys, but it's very, very valuable to us to be able to have some action on the part of a committee to look at, so that we can gauge what is going on in these committees. A voluntary deferral really gives us nothing to work with, other than in certain cases to basically say, okay, this legislator on this bill just didn't fight for his legislation. I don't know what else to say about it. I'm not prepared at all to come to that conclusion about Rodney Shammerhorn or Chuck Owen or others, because I don't believe they habitually do this. But please understand how valuable it is to go in and force some substantive action in committee on your legislation other than a voluntary deferral. It's very valuable to us.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. Okay, next up, House Bill 589 by Representative Les Farnham. This, Chris, when we were initially looking at bills this session, we looked at this and we were like, this isn't even asking for enough, right? This is his bill that would require a 500-foot setback for carbon dioxide pipelines, because people need some protection from this. This isn't even enough to actually protect them, but we were joking that this would at least prevent the carbon dioxide pipeline from going through the middle of an elementary school, right? Like, there's got to be some law that says, okay, you can't just run this in the front of my house.
Well, exactly. I mean, in current law, Danielle, it prohibits the injection of CO2, within 500 feet, I think, of a school or a home that is not involved in the actual agreement to do this, just some third party or so that meager 500 feet restriction already exists for the actual CO2 injections, but not for the pipelines. So as you said, run the pipeline right through the middle of my kid's classroom, no problem whatsoever. This bill would have said you have to do the 500-foot limit for pipelines as well as for the injection. And I don't believe that got anywhere, did it?
No, it was never heard in House Natural Resources. And if people are following what's going on in Georgia with the AI data centers, where people's homes are being either completely expropriated or they're literally putting the data center almost like in their front yard, right? Where all those EMFs and all the sound of this massive data center is destroying their quality of life. That's what's coming for us when they were not even willing to hear this bill in House Natural Resources. That's what I take away from it.
Me too. Me too. So 500-foot rule applies to the injection wells, but feel free to run a highly pressurized industrial pipeline within 500 feet of my kid's school. That's what the legislature basically said by killing this legislation. Not really killing it, not even giving it a vote.
Not even giving it a vote. And then the question that I have out there, Chris, and maybe you know the answer to it. I mean, do they have to expropriate the land for pipelines, or do people have to agree to pipelines? What's the deal with the pipelines?
Of course. Anything, whether it's a pipeline or an injection well, of course, if it's private property, absolutely they have to expropriate it. And the law in Louisiana allows both domestic and foreign corporations to expropriate property for CO2 injection wells and CO2 pipelines. Absolutely. That right exists in Louisiana right now. So yes, if it's private property, to answer your question, yes. If they don't, yeah, they could expropriate it.
Okay. Well, that's disgusting. I mean, I thought that was the case, but it's good to put a fine point on it.
Sure.
All right, the next bill is House Bill 595 by Representative Jacob Landry. And when Chris, you and I looked at this at the beginning of session, we were like, red alert. This is completely antithetical to self-determination at the local level. This is a bill that prohibits local governing authorities from actions that impede the state's ability to develop natural resources, including additional permitting requirements. So it's saying, in effect, the parishes can't get in the way of what the state wants to do. No, and I'm sure, all those good little Republicans just lined up and said, well, it's really good to lessen bureaucracy. Chris, as far as I'm concerned, this is the only bill all session that passed that in any way lessened bureaucracy, and what it actually does is it weakens local control.
Absolutely. And of course, Jacob Landry postured this legislation as, when we're doing legitimate energy development, oil and gas development, we can't have local recalcitrant governments holding up the permitting process through these local regulations that prevent legitimate commercial economic development. That's not what this bill does. This bill basically says that if it has to do with natural resources in the state of Louisiana, the state has plenary and total control over this, permitting and regulating, and the local governments have zero power. So to the extent that perhaps there was some degree of life left in the prospect of local authority flailing on the ground, dying, this bill put the dagger in the heart of local autonomy when it comes to carbon capture and sequestration by vesting complete and total authority in the state with regard to the permitting and the regulating and the overseeing of economic development as it relates to natural resources in Louisiana. That's what 595 does. I testified against this bill, and it nonetheless passed out of committee unanimously and then passed on the House floor. This bill has nothing to do with the legitimate accelerating of commercial oil and gas projects in local parishes and communities when the local governments are trying to hold it up or slowing it down or slow walking it. Nothing to do with that. That was a pretext for bringing a bill to once and finally put the dagger in the heart of local authority when it comes to carbon capture and sequestration. We called it out early, we testified against it, and it passed out of committee, and I think passed overwhelmingly on the House and Senate floor. I think it might be at the governor's desk now. I don't know.
Yeah, it's at the governor's desk if he hasn't signed it already, Chris. And this is the reason that Robbie Carter is one of my heroes for this session and going forward, because he was the only legislator, Democrat, in the House that voted against it. He's the only legislator in the entire in both chambers to stand up and say no to this, to call it what it was. And you know what it is to me, Chris? You know what this bill is to me? remember whenever you and I were raising the red five alarm fire was it last year or 2 years ago on the NDA
Oh, yeah,
legislation?
absolutely.
This is a companion to that NDA legislation. So the NDA is saying you can't know what we're doing, and now this is even taking it one step further and saying, well, guess what? The parishes really don't have any right to know anything anyway, so we're just going to go in and do it without them.
Well, of course, exactly. Do whatever they want to do. So just to round this out and put this together, Danielle, in the same year that the House Natural Resources Committee defeats HB 5, which would allow local governments and local communities to make this decision about CCS, they kill that and pass overwhelmingly a bill that says, not only are you not going to have any power, but we're not going to give you the option here, we're going to make sure that you never ever have any power and authority over any CCS permit in your parish ever again. This does it right here, House Bill 595, Jacob Landry. And I don't buy the excuses that were proffered before the House Natural Resources Committee. I think it's an absolute red herring and a pretext.
Yeah. All right, we got a couple left. Next one is House Bill 671 by Representative Chuck Owen. It requires the department to appoint an acquisition agent to manage and facilitate the process for any entity utilizing expropriation for carbon dioxide storage-related activities, and requires the expropriating authority to reimburse the department for costs related to the completion of the process.
Yeah, and I think it was a reasonably good bill, but again, no hearing. No
Never
hearing.
heard. Never heard in House Natural Resources.
And I think it would have also restricted the use of eminent domain for storage, just for the storage part of it. So I think it was a good bill, but didn't even get a hearing. Danielle, the ultimate indignity is not to have a hearing and to have your bill rejected. The ultimate indignity is to not even have a hearing, to be so utterly indifferent to the concerns that the bill raises and the issues that it's trying to address that you don't even call it for a hearing. That
And
is the ultimate indignity.
And Chris, I don't know whether some of these bills got heard, but as you're saying that, all I can think about is Representative Sylvia Taylor brought a bill that would criminalize aggressive Mardi Gras bead throwing, right? And you mentioned Senator Jeremy Stein brought a bill that was to show how to appropriately wear a seatbelt. I don't know if those got a hearing, but this is some of the stuff that may have gotten a hearing over bills that would have protected landowners.
Think about it. Think about that. Wow. So, of course, and the bill originally brought by, I think it was Candace Newell, that would have created the crime of contempt of the legislature.
And that actually made it through. So we know that one got a hearing.
Eviscerated. They totally took
Yeah.
out the part about a citizen being able to be fined and anything for disorder. They took all that out. It just has to do with if you fail to respond to a subpoena and you don't go, whatever. But either way, the point is her original version of that bill got a hearing. Yet this bills that we're talking about here that really do matter and are important, they don't have the dignity of a hearing. I just think that's worth pointing out.
It is worth pointing out. All right, House Bill 841, Chris, by Brett Guyman. And this, why don't you talk about this bill? Because I know this had you super hot under the collar.
Honestly, it enraged me. It absolutely enraged me. House Bill 841, the Landman's Code of Conduct, which imposes certain basic requirements on the men who are going on people's property to begin the expropriation issue, discussing it with them. The ones who are boots on the ground when these expropriations are occurring, when people's property is being seized. This is a bill that would require them to engage certain standards of conduct and basic decency when dealing with a property owner. You got to give them 30 days notice before you can file an expropriation action. You got to do an objective appraisal. You have to pay all the costs if you've got to do a formal expropriation. Certain procedural due process protections for property owners. Okay, This bill passed out of the House Natural Resources Committee, passed on the House floor overwhelmingly 94-0, and then gets over to the Senate Natural Resources Committee, where Representative Guyman has an exchange with the chairman, Bob Hinzgens, the chairman of the Senate Natural Resources Committee, and they decide to voluntarily defer the bill because it still needs some tweaking, and we still need to refine it, and we still need to make sure that it's a good bill that protects the citizens. So we're going to wait until the spring, and then we're going to come back and bring it again, and we'll have a good bill then. I'm sorry, Representative Guyman. I think that you've done a lot of good things in the legislature. I don't understand this at all. I think you let the people down. I think you let property owners down by not fighting for your legislation. There was no reason whatsoever to defer this bill that provides basic procedural due process protections to property owners when their property is being seized from them. There's no reason to have deferred this legislation for another session to come back and try to get it. Why couldn't you have amended this, tweaked it up, and gotten this passed and signed this session? I think that's a pretext. I think it's a red herring, and I think it's unfortunate that this bill died the way that it did in front of a guy like Bob Hinzgens, who couldn't be any closer to the CCS racket if it were wrapped around his neck like a dirty tie. And so I think it's unfortunate that you allowed this bill to die in his committee. You should have fought for it. And I'm being straight.
Yeah, you are being straight. And Chris, we recently reviewed the committee hearing just to get to the bottom of what in the world happened here. And I recall that Representative Guyman said that this is a good bill. It could be stronger. It could be better. And so therefore, this is why we want to defer it. And my response to that is we have seen lots of nasty bills get passed with the excuse that we're going to come back and fix it later. Well, none of those bills ever get fixed later, or very few of them get fixed later, especially if they're not in the favor of the people. However, this bill was in good shape. We were happy with it the way it was. Now, maybe, of course, anything could be improved upon, I'm sure. But for crying out loud, just pass it. Just pass it the way it is and go and fix it next year.
I read the bill, Danielle. I read the bill. There's a very, very good bill. Nothing wrong with it. If you want to put an amendment on it, that's fine. And then, do it that way. But this is not an 80-page piece of legislation involving complex issues of law. This is a very straightforward bill that creates reasonable property protections for landowners who are having their property stolen from them. You don't have to take another 6 months to fix this. This should have been fixed now. And for Senator Hinzgens to sit up there in his haughty, condescending tone and say, well, Representative Guyman, it usually takes 2 or 3 or 4 years to get a piece of legislation passed. Go straight to hell. Go straight to hell, Senator Hinzgens, and get out of the CCS sewer. Nobody believes that. And you should be standing up for your constituents, yourself. I know you were behind this. I know that you told Brett Guyman we're going to kill this. This may have come from the governor. Representative Guyman, it was not his idea to kill this and credit to him, it was not his idea to kill this. Brett Guyman would have loved for this bill to get through and pass the floor and be signed. He wanted this piece of legislation. You're responsible for this. Hinzgens, you are responsible for this. And I hope and pray that your voters and your constituents are smart enough to know how deeply embedded you are with this racket and this fraud in this state. And I hope they're smart enough to kick your ass out of office if and when you're up for re-election. They need to do that.
Well, everybody's up for re-election next year unless they term out, right? Maybe somebody can chat in. Somebody can chat in where Senator Hinzgens is in his whether he's close to terming out. All right, Chris. Just a couple left, folks. Just a couple left. Thanks for sticking with us. And I do want to mention Walter chatted in. He posted in the chat here on Rumble. It looks like an event, Politics with a Punch. Jeff Cruere. He says 6 p.m. social, 7 p.m. show. See you there. And then he said we must all be at town halls and be informed for next year. Let me, I'll click that
Absolutely.
link.
Sir
Let me click
Walter.
on that link. Thursday, June 11th, Dearman's Diner on Jefferson Highway in Baton Rouge. Walter, you won't see me there. I'll be at the We the People meeting this evening in Homa at the Homa Courtyard Marriott. We have an event featuring Ed Tarpley. So excited for that this evening. But if you're in the Baton Rouge area, by all means, sounds like a great event.
I'm going to try to go. Sir
Okay.
Walter, I'm going to try to be there. By the way, I want to thank Walter for his steadfast support of LeCag and the State of Freedom. A truly great, great American
Yeah.
who is down at the legislature a lot and, just a great fighter, great warrior. We're going to get some good things done next session.
Yeah. And yeah, he said hot under the collar much. Yeah, I told you, I warned everybody that that bill really, really got Chris fired up, and he didn't hold back. Maybe he did hold back. Y'all should be happy. I think he
No,
did hold back.
I was going about 40 or 50 miles an hour. Believe me, I have
You have more
the vast
capacity.
majority of it voluntarily under control.
All right, next up, House Bill 1136. Oh, you know what? I think I mentioned, sorry, House Bill 877 by Robbie Carter. This would have prohibited carbon capture facilities from utilizing the same pipeline for transport of carbon dioxide for storage. Okay, Colonel Guillory, if you are listening right now, please put something in the chat because I have a faint recollection of something you told me about this bill a couple weeks ago when we were on the phone. But what I believe I recall, and I may botch this, is that this would have been a very, very important bill to bring forward because of the way the permitting happens. And there's certain rules around permitting which basically don't allow the CCS companies to acquire a permit the way that the statutes are written or the regulations, probably the statutes. And so
Yeah.
if this bill would have passed, it would have completely killed CCS pipeline transport, period, in the state.
Yeah, and I want to get some clarification from Colonel Guillory on that as well, because if that is in fact the case, if this bill would have prohibited the sharing of pipelines that already exist for sharing those pipelines for CCS use, and the law currently precludes them from building entirely new pipeline infrastructure for CCS, then obviously that would have killed it because you got to have the pipelines. My thought on it was simply that by requiring them to build new pipelines for all of this, that at a minimum, it would have created much more costs and perhaps even have made it cost prohibitive to proceed if they're having to start from ground zero on the implementation of this. So I thought it was good for that reason. But if in fact what Colonel Guillory, what you think he said is true, then that's yet another reason why I'm sure they killed this.
Well, they killed it before it was born, right? It was never heard in House Natural
Yeah.
Resources, and this is, I think we're picking up on a theme here of really important bills that never even got to see the light of day.
And I'd like another explanation, if we could, Danielle. I'm sure why all of these bills that we've been over, all these important items of legislation, very important items of legislation, were not given the dignity of a hearing in committee.
Yeah.
I think that's extremely important, and it's going to be reflected, frankly, on our scorecard. It has to be.
Yeah, and I think, Chris, one thing that's important to mention is we could have not mentioned these, right? Because they never
Of course.
they never had any action. And I think up until now, people didn't really talk about the bills that never got heard. But this is the place where you're going to hear the things that tried to get brought forward, that were going to protect you, that were going to protect the state, that don't get a hearing. And I think it's incredibly, incredibly important. Next up, House Bill 1136 by Representative Robbie Carter, and this would have prohibited the transport of carbon dioxide in rights of way used for petroleum transportation. We thought at the outset, Chris, that this one probably was it was a long shot.
Sure. Yeah. In other words, you can't use the existing corridors, pipeline corridors that have been carved out and servitudes for natural gas, transport of natural gas. You don't get to stack on those and use those same corridors. You have to come up with a different route, which frankly also would have imposed more costs and burdens on the CCS companies. So, you know, it doesn't surprise me that this one didn't go anywhere. And I guess rather perversely, you know, if you're going to allow this to occur, I mean, is it in the best interests of the citizens of Louisiana to be you know, carving out entirely new routes and paths for this across perhaps other people's property that don't need to be involved in this when there are already pre-existing corridors for it? I don't really know. I just know that, you know, if I had been there and could have voted on this, I would have voted for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Walter says Senator Hinskin was elected in 2018 and his, I guess, eligibility ends in 2028. So I guess he
Yeah.
may have one more.
Somebody needs to run against him. And I just want you to know that we have the scorecard. We know exactly what he did, exactly how he voted. And if he's going around his parishes and telling people anything any different than what we know. Let me just say this. I promise you that where is he from, Danielle? Where is Hinskins from?
I don't know, Chris.
Okay, well,
Let
I
me see.
guarantee you that if the citizens of the parishes that he represents knew what he has done in the legislature on matters that are of extreme significance to the citizens of his parish that matter a lot, he couldn't be reelected. So understand, we know exactly what he's done, and also we know that he just
Abbeville.
Abbeville.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
a conservative area.
Vermilion Parish. Yeah, I have family in Vermilion Parish. So anyway, it's very important that people there understand the votes that Senator Hinskins has made, and more importantly, the things that he has orchestrated the death of in his committee and also on the floor. I think
Acadia,
it's
Lafayette,
atrocious.
and Vermilion.
Yeah.
Acadia.
The
okay.
citizens of Acadia, Lafayette, and Vermilion knew his legislative history. I think one of my dogs could beat him for reelection. So just understand, we have the goods. Reach out to us. We got it all compiled. I think it's very, very important that somebody run against him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nobody is more responsible in the state of Louisiana for the implementation of carbon capture and sequestration unrestricted in our state, and for the killing and the demise of any effort to restrict that or to impose reasonable restrictions on it than Bob Hinskins. Nobody. Nobody is more neck deep in carbon capture and sequestration, this taxpayer subsidized scam, than Bob Hinskins, with the possible exception of Julia Letlow, because she's absolutely neck deep in it, does nothing to repeal the 45Q tax credits on the federal level. And of course, her fiance is the most powerful CCS lobbyist in the state of Louisiana. Bottom line is this: I haven't been in a great mood today, Danielle, and I apologize for if I have gone off on too many rants here, but sometimes things just have to be said the way they need to be said.
Well, on that note, we're going to turn to a piece of legislation that will send a lot of people into orbit, and that is House, is it continuing resolution? It's
Yeah,
HCR,
concurrent.
House Concurrent Resolution 80 by Representative Domingue. And this is just a slap in the face to every reasonable person in this state. Do you want to talk about it, Chris?
Danielle, I don't understand. It just absolutely stuns me. I mean, the level of obtuseness, the absolute inability to read a room or to understand the way this would be perceived. We're looking here at someone who has been at the very tip of the spear in absolutely gutting every piece of legislation in 25 and 26 that came down the pike, right there in the House Natural Resources Committee, Jessica Domingue. Nobody has done more to gut good legislation designed to roll this back, and nobody has done more to champion this taxpayer-subsidized scam, carbon capture and sequestration in Louisiana. She's absolutely eviscerated the rights of homeowners in our legislature. She starts to get major pushback. She starts feeling the heat on it, on her votes. And so what does she do? Late in the session, she brings this House concurrent resolution. What the hell is the number on it?
80.
80, which basically this glowing recitation of property rights in Louisiana and how landowners feel like they're being threatened by the rude behavior of these landmen who are going on their property and not treating them with dignity and with respect. So I urge the passage of legislation, whatever the hell it says, that requires landowners to engage. And this is basically the identical of Brett Guyman's bill that was killed over in the Senate, but it's a resolution version of it. I'm sorry, Representative Domain, but it is too little, it is too late. Your ship has sailed, and it sailed a long, long time ago. And there's absolutely nothing that you can do at this point to redeem yourself in the eyes of your constituents insofar as the absolute dereliction of your public duty to them on this issue of carbon capture and sequestration. You can bring as many resolutions as you want to bring. You can talk all you want to talk about the protection of private property. It's not what you say, it is what you do and what you have done. And I can't think of another legislator who has been more of a menace, perennial menace, habitual menace to the core rights of property owners and taxpayers and Louisiana citizens than you. So frankly, I don't even want to read your resolution. I looked at it for about 5 seconds, and once I started reading about how you're talking about private property rights, and I said, I don't have time to read this. This is an absolute affront to property owners in Louisiana. So sorry, that's how I feel about it. And of course, she deferred the resolution pending Guyman's bill says the same thing, and his bill ended up dying as well. But Domain, you just when you think Jessica Eminent Domain cannot insult the intelligence or the dignity of Louisiana citizens to any greater degree, she comes up with this.
Well, and I'll just read what the HCR does, which is it expresses the legislature's commitment to protecting private property rights.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah, that's the part I read to before I stopped reading, because she has no commitment to the protection of private property rights. What are you writing this for? Everything that you have done has demonstrated just the opposite of what this resolution says. Just the opposite. And the only reason why you're doing it is because you're now feeling heat from your people, because you're probably not going to be reelected, so you're coming up with this. Just don't insult us, okay? Just don't insult us. Don't add to your consistent betrayal of your constituents this intellectual hypocrisy. At least be consistent, okay? But this is not going to help you. This is not a life raft you can depend on. Sorry for interrupting.
No, you're fine. You're fine, Chris. Okay, and then just kind of to round things out for today, I really wanted to strike a contrast for people. So if you recall, there's a bill that we talked about basically almost every single day during session, and that was House Bill 284 by Representative John Weibel. And it was his bill that was a smokescreen, used a smokescreen of blight, to be able to expropriate private property without due process. You and I, Chris, were upset about this from the moment we laid eyes on it. Of course, early on, we thought that it may be for the best of intentions. Later, we realized that wasn't the case because Representative Weibel had many, many, many opportunities to offer amendments to the bill that would have provided some due process rights to property owners whose property is being expropriated due to undefined blight. However, he never did. He never did. So I guess you lost us there, Representative Weibel, basically. But I wanted to just point out who the people were who voted against House Bill 7, which is the bill that would have protected private property rights of citizens from expropriation.
From CCS eminent domain, right.
From CCS eminent domain. The people who voted, what did I say? They voted not to...
They voted against HB 7, right?
They voted against HB 7. So that means they voted to allow eminent domain for your private property for CCS.
Yes.
And then they voted in favor of this bill that also would expropriate private property, right? So let me just say that as succinctly as I can. They voted to continue to enable people to take your property for CCS, and they voted for a new way to take your private property according to some undefined term they use, blight. But it's not defined in the bill itself, right? So the
Exactly.
people who voted that way are Jacob Broad, Jessica Domingue, Joe Ongeron, and Z Zarang. So I just wanted to mention that because these people are voting consistently to strip you of your private property rights, completely and consistently. And maybe just another note, and if Patricia's still there, I'd also mention, you mentioned Representative Shane Mack. He voted for House Bill 7. So he was in support of protecting private property rights insofar as it comes to CCS. But he voted for House Bill 284. So he voted for private property to be taken from you for undefined reasons. So that's also inexplicable, Patricia. So if you wanted to just add that to the things that don't make sense about Representative Shane Mack right now on a the way that his decisions are getting made, I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, and it's not like, Danielle, this bill was not addressed. The problems with HB 284 were not fully addressed on the House floor through Gabe Fermit, Raymond Cruz, principally, and others about the problems with this to try to seize, quote unquote, abandoned or blighted property, so vaguely defined in the bill, and trying to do this, allowing local governments to do this with not even minimal due process protections to the person who owns this property. I thought it was extraordinary that this would even be considered in the state legislature. And yet, some of the same people, these four, Zarang, Broad, Domingue, and Orgeron, those four, not only voted against a bill that would protect property owners against CCS, but voted for a bill that would further erode those protections in a different context under the pretext of trying to do something about blight. And I think it's so interesting, Danielle, that the bill, the 284 bill, and I thought this was quite suspicious, that 284 only would apply to communities with 20,000 people or less, only rural communities, the very same place where they're trying to dump all these data centers and the main place where they're going to roll these CCS pipelines and bury all this CO2 waste. Do you think it's coincidental? I don't.
No, I don't. Well, thankfully, this bill ultimately failed, but it was no
Because we worked hard, and you worked hard, and we all worked hard to get it done. But thank God it failed.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris Walter says that he says, I will buy you a cocktail if I see you tonight. So there's your added incentive for making it out to Jeff's event.
Walter, you know that I like a cocktail, Walter. And plus, I get to see you. Let me tell you what, I think I'll be there. I look forward to it.
All right. Well, we have kept y'all for nearly 2 hours. I think this was just, I can't say it enough, it was just an important airing of what happened with respect to carbon capture and sequestration and private property rights this session. So we wanted to give a full account in all one show. I think we managed to do that, even though it was an extended version. I'll just make a couple of announcements about what's going on next week. We have joining us on Tuesday, Christy Hike from Louisiana Republican Assembly. She will be joining us on Tuesday to talk about the bill that failed that would have allowed or would have at least acknowledged the parties, the Republican State Central Committee and the Democrat State Central Committee, to self-determine how their party primaries are run. How that bill failed. She'll be joining us to talk about that. And then Chris and I will be doing a wrap up of some of the election related bills that made it through the legislature this session. And of course, the ones that stalled out as well. On Wednesday, it'll be Warrior Wednesday. And just a reminder, folks, if you are not part of Warrior Wednesday, we want you to join us. So plan to tune in on Wednesday, plan to chat in on Wednesday. And if you are a member of the Warrior Circle, you have particular, let's say, perks. And one of those is that you get a link and you can do a live call-in on Warrior Wednesdays. We will be having John Fleming join us on Wednesday to talk about how the Senate race is shaping up for him. and very excited and looking forward to talking to him. Also, we haven't had him back since he won, got through the first round. So we'll be looking forward to hearing his reflections on how that race shook out and what his expectations are going into June 27th. And then on Thursday, we will have Paul Hurd back with us to talk about the latest for redistricting, what is it going to look like going into the 2026 midterms in Louisiana, and whether the Louisiana Legislature drew another gerrymandered map, and whether the people of the state of Louisiana are going to have to vote in a disenfranchised map yet again. So I think he will give us the full unfiltered view of that. And I think that's it. I guess I'll just also mention once more, We the People Bayou Community has an event tonight in Houma. So if you would like to attend, you can visit wtpbayou.org, go to events, reserve your seat. We'd love to see you there tonight. We get started at 6. And I think
Love
that's
Ed
it, Chris.
Tarpley. Absolutely
Yeah.
love Ed Tarpley.
Yeah.
I wanted also to encourage people to join the State of Freedom, join LeCag, support us. Because guess what? If you're a tax-paying Louisiana citizen who's concerned about the size, scope, and behavior of your government,
Yeah.
we're all you got. And guess what? We're all you need. So bring it to us. Help us out. Make donations. Subscribe. Join. Because we don't have any intention of losing. We have intention of winning. God bless you, Danielle.
God bless you, Chris. And I will see you back here on Tuesday at 10.
Take care.
All right.
Blanco Brothers has been in business in Louisiana for about 30 years now. I have personal experience with this company, and I know others who have as well. If you have a business or a home and you've got roofing, gutter, sheet metal issues at all, one number you need to know, and that's Blanco Brothers Construction. He will treat you right financially, and he will take very good care of you with regard to the quality of the service that he provides. I cannot recommend Blanco Brothers Construction more highly enough. Memorize the number 225-226-4222. Blanco Brothers Construction, the very best in the business. Red Zeppelin is the best kept secret, but because of us, it's really not a secret anymore. Anybody who has not been to Red Zeppelin on Perkins Road in Baton Rouge, you're truly missing out. The best environment, the best service, and the best pizza in the state of Louisiana. Go to Red Zeppelin today. Tell them the State of Freedom sent you.
Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Any follow-up actions, resources, and links to our sponsors will be in the show notes. All calls to action can be taken at lacag.org. That's LACAG.org.
To learn more about our work, become a monthly subscriber, supporter, or advertiser at freedomstate.us. The State of Freedom, the #1 conservative podcast in Louisiana.